Our News on Terror segment tonight, really we should call this segment the story of a hero. What we're learning about the ambush in Niger that killed 4 Americans. This is what the media should have focused on from the beginning, the story of a hero, Sergeant LaDavid Johnson, and what the man did to save the lives of his brothers in arms. With me now, national security and foreign policy reporter for the Daily Caller News Foundation, Sagar Enjeti. Sagar, good to see you.
Thanks for having me, Liz.
Sagar, this story is a tragedy. We lost 4 of our countrymen. People lost, families lost their son, their brother, their father, their spouse. It's extremely difficult to talk about it still, especially having family members in the military. But lost in the media drama about President Trump's call to Sergeant Johnson's widow is the fact that as we find out more details about Sergeant Johnson, what he did during this ambush, and what he did in the final minutes of his life, this man is a hero.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exactly as you said, and this is what really bears coverage, is the fact that, you know, a survivor of the ambush has come out and has talked on background that Sergeant Johnson actually manned a machine gun, you know, near the end of his life and laid down suppressive fire against these ISIS terrorists. And we're now seeing reports that over 20 of the militants were killed, despite the fact that there was no air cover, that they only had, you know, small arms, they didn't have heavy weaponry to defend themselves. This was, you know, a brutal, close-up combat fight. And the survivor said, you know, he wants Sergeant Johnson's wife, you know, regardless of whatever the call was with President Trump, he wants her and his children to know that the man died a hero, you know, in defense of his fellow soldiers. You know, he apparently fired the machine gun until he ran out of ammo. He grabbed a sniper rifle and shot as many terrorists as he could, you know, a knockdown, drag-out fight, and he went down fighting.
Right, and that's what we owe him. That's what we owe his memory to be. Not some politicized phone call, but actually looking at his service, looking at his sacrifice and honoring that. That takes an incredible amount of bravery, especially in the face. This was not a fair fight, and I'll put that in quotes because nothing is fair in war, but this was 12 United States Army soldiers, Green Berets, versus something like 50 ISIS militants. They were ambushed and attacked. The more that comes out about this story, it seems like the United States forces were actually set up for this ambush.
Yeah, so Secretary Mattis has a favorite saying, is he doesn't want the U.S. to ever be in a fair fight. And unfortunately, this was, you know, relatively fair. It was small arm v. small arm. Yes, you know, we have the best trained military in the world, but when you have 50 guys with, you know, with small arms and RPGs coming at you in a kill zone, it's not a good thing. But essentially, what we're hearing now is that American soldiers were on a, you know, routine, you know, kind of reconnaissance mission out in the middle of Niger near the Malian border, and that they were on a recon mission for, you know, hunting a high-value target. Then it sounds like the villagers are actually the ones who set up our soldiers because they were delaying them in a meeting while the ambush was being set up. And at the time, you know, these militants are known to have some sort of connection with this village, and, you know, the details are very, very unclear on this entire raid, but it wasn't a fair fight. You know, the soldiers were definitely, almost certainly set up by these villagers. And, you know, even the circumstances surrounding the ambush itself remain very unclear. What we're hearing now is that 4 of the Green Berets were actually separated from the rest of their teammates while they were evacuated, and that special operators actually had to go out there, and that's when they stumbled upon the dead bodies of 3 of them, and Sergeant Johnson's body took another 2 days to find.
Right, and I think that's part of the controversy, or that's part of the question, is why it took so long to find Sergeant Johnson's body, because 48 hours is a long time. And of course, the military has a mantra, you know, no man left behind, you never leave your brothers in arms. Why did it take so long for them to find him?
Yeah, that's, again, you know, I would love to know the answer to that question. What we do know is that French, Nigerian, and U.S. forces were on the ground for 48 hours, you know, like absolutely scouring the ground looking for him. He was found by local villagers and turned over to the Nigerian security forces. Reports are saying somewhere around a mile away from the rest of the ambush site, but it now sounds like there could have been 2 ambush sites, and that Sergeant Johnson actually might have been separated from the rest of his units with those 3 Green Berets who were also killed, like I was talking about.
Right.
So, you know, the Pentagon is not being particularly forthcoming in terms of information on this, but, you know, our men were out there, and they have had a tough tough fight. That's all we really know.
Right, and all we know, I mean, we know too, when we're talking about Green Berets, I mean, they fight with unconventional warfare, so they wouldn't have been all grouped together, which could be a plausible theory for why he was separated. That we'll have to wait and see the details from the Pentagon when we find them. But going back to what you said before about a high-value target, they essentially were going after a terror leader, if I'm not mistaken. They had a meeting set up with an elder in this village who supposedly had information on the whereabouts of this terror leader. The elder delayed the meeting just enough, just enough time that allowed this ambush to happen. And that's where the theory, I guess, came to fruition, that the villagers, and this elder included, were privy to this ambush. They were part of setting this up because, as we know, Al-Qaeda in that region doesn't ingratiate themselves with local villages.
Yeah, so this village, and the guy. So this is actually an Islamic State attack, but the guy who is the so-called emir of this ISIS chapter has deep ties to Al-Qaeda. He's a Malian terrorist that's been on the U.S. drone strike list for a really long time. That's essentially is what we were going out there to do. We were doing reconnaissance, finding information. What reports kind of suggest now is that this village, the villagers or somebody tipped off our soldiers that this village elder might have information about this attack. Now, it might have actually been a setup in order to get them in the area, that way that whenever they were leaving, that they were hit with this ambush. But, it's as you said, what we know is that the village elder has been arrested. He's been arrested by Nigerian security forces, and all the leaks so far suggest that, somebody in this village, perhaps the entire village itself, perhaps just a few bad apples, are the ones who set up our troops.
Right, and the part we do know is that Sergeant Johnson, in the face of this tragedy, in the face of this ambush, he acted with bravery and courage and loyalty to his brothers in arms, and he is a hero in this. And like I said at the beginning, that's what we owe him. We owe his memory. We owe this honor to him, and we should ignore the drama that Congresswoman Wilson tried to steal the spotlight from him, essentially, and that's despicable. So